Welcome back to BensTechLab. Today we're going to find out if a cheap Chinese X79 motherboard can fit in the Cooler Master NR200 case. Alright, I'm pretty excited to check out this case. I really wanted to get one of the higher end cases like the N-Case M1 or the Sliger Cerberus case. However, I could buy 3 or 4 of the Cooler Master NR200s for the price of one Sliger Cerberus case shipped to where I am in Canada. Part of that is just the reality of shipping in a COVID world right now, going from the US to Canada, and the other part is just materials and craftsmanship kind of stuff. The more premium cases, like the N-Case M1 and the Sliger Cerberus, are mostly aluminum and very high end. This is going to be a stamped steel case, so it's not quite as premium of materials. However, I think they've done a really good job with it from what I could see online. So I just want to know whether this case is going to fit a smaller micro-ATX motherboard. Ooh, a little bit of static on there. I decided to go ahead and get it in white. I bought everything in black for like 20 years, and then just this year have decided to change things up a bit, get some white accessories in my office, brighten things up. Started with the white speakers and then the white tower PC. Now we're going to check this one out. So there it is. Very nice. Nice plain front face. Vented side panels. There's the rear cutouts. I like it. Other side panel. There's the top. There is room for 2 fans on the top as well as your top I/O. And there's the power button and such. And the bottom is supposed to be quite nice too. You can also fit a radiator under there if you wanted to, or a couple of fans depending on what you're setting up. So let's get this thing open. There are toolless side panels, which is great. There is a filter material included on this case, but it's really not very fine at all. I think maybe it'll keep out some larger dust fluffs, but not small dust in the air. So, but that's what you get at this price point, right? And first thing you see here is the side bracket, which can be used for a radiator. Let's grab a screwdriver here. We'll take that off. There's a nice little box of parts in there. Let's get a shot of that. See what's inside here. So we've got one of the fans on here. Got a few of the little cable bits. Looks like maybe a fan splitter. It's got 3 outputs and 1 input. That's super handy because these Chinese motherboards generally only have 1, maybe 2 fan headers. So that's nice. Bag of screws and fasteners on here. This is the bracket if you are using a large graphics card and you want to put a PCI, put it vertical in the case, not horizontal. Bonus fan grill in there. And lots of little zip ties. Really nice if you're going to do some cable management that they included that. All right, so we got our front panel I/O connections here. You got your USB 3 connector. That'll be front panel audio. Looks almost like a USB 2, but it's front panel audio because the space is in the middle of the connector there. And this will be your motherboard connections. Power switch, power LED, reset switch. They come all nicely pre-bundled. That's kind of nice, but it does look like you can take them apart in case your motherboard's not in a standard configuration. All right, so before we get any further, we want to check out this motherboard tray. So if you look closely, you can see here 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the standard mini ITX mounting positions. There is no additional screws down here for micro-ATX, but the micro-ATX, the smaller version of micro-ATX, can fit when a case has 3-slot GPU space on the PCI brackets. So let's do a quick dry fit here, see if it's gonna work. Oh, look at that. Beautiful. It's totally going to fit in this case, which is awesome. What else I'm noticing here, you might not be able to see on camera at this angle, we'll see here, but the position of the top case fan here is directly over this VRM, which is what I was testing in my previous video. The VRM can get quite toasty, so I'm going to test both intake fan versus exhaust fan here to see which keeps this VRM the coolest. But I've got lots of options, so that's great. This 92mm fan can also be moved up and down on the back panel of this case to line up with your cooler for a cooler exhaust. So we'll be able to move this down just ever so slightly to line up with the position of the cooler in this case. So now that I know it fits, I'm not afraid to take it apart more and keep going with the build. All right, quick note before we go any further. I had bought this Noctua NH-U9S cooler specifically because it fits in the N-Case M1 and the Sliger Cerberus cases, which are a little narrower than normal. The NR200 is not quite as narrow as those and might be able to fit a more standard height air cooler. And because the purpose of this build was to be as cheap as possible, I did buy the infamous Snowman cooler. These are super cheap and you buy them out of China off of eBay or AliExpress. I think it's like about $20 US. The Noctua NH-U9S is probably more around the $70 mark. So considerably cheaper, and I want to see if this will fit in this case because the whole point of this server build using used parts off of eBay and AliExpress is to see how much we can do with how little money. So I did want to try this out and see if it's going to fit in this case. All right, so there's the Snowman cooler. Pretty standard tower cooler. This is the cheapest one, so it's the 4 heat pipe version. There is a 5 or 6 heat pipe version that's available for a few bucks more. Either way, they're still cheaper than any of the big name brand ones. They're not designed to be super compact, they're just designed to cool. All right, so let's prep the motherboard. So for these Snowman coolers, that's when you do want to use these little brackets that came with the motherboard. The Snowman cooler does come with one itself as well. And it'll let you stick that on an LGA 2011 socket. All right, that Snowman cooler fits in there pretty good. Most likely, let's see here. It looks like the side panel could stay on here. That's useful for 2 reasons. You could have an extra fan mounted over here if you wanted to. But this is also where you can mount a 3.5-inch hard drive if you're looking to do that. There's lots of room inside for 2.5-inch hard drives all over the place, but this is the only official spot for a 3.5-inch hard drive would be mounted to this bracket. So good to see that that could fit. So the Snowman cooler can fit inside and it will close 100% flush and has enough room. It is very close, but we're a couple of millimeters clearance there. It's enough room that you can use this inexpensive cooler. Okay, we've tested the basic fitment that we can fit all the components we want to in this case, so I'm good to go. Let's finish up the build. So we've got our NVMe SSD, we've got our RAM, we've got our cooler and our processor. Let's get our case back. Now, of course, we need this back panel. With the size of this micro-ATX motherboard, you can't put the standard SFX power supply bracket right next to it here because the mounting fins on this side will go under the board and could short something out or touch something it shouldn't. But this case has a lot of modularity. You can move it around. So one of the things you can do is put it on the front of the case like that, and your SFX power supply can be right there. So that's what I'm going to do. Add this little Silverstone one left over from a previous mini ITX build. There we go, we got a power supply. Get that 24 pin on there first, then we'll go for our 8 pin. This is not a modular power supply, but it's what I had on hand here. Keep those out of the fan there. There we go. Alright, having the bottom come off is definitely handy when you're trying to figure out the front panel connectors, and some of these Chinese motherboards don't have standard front panel connector layouts, so you might have to mess around with the order of the pins on this connection here. And this motherboard does not have USB 3 on board. It is USB 2 only, but which is fine from a performance perspective because I don't plan on plugging in external storage or other high performance devices, but just to use those USB ports in case I want to use them for a flash drive, for booting up, that kind of thing. I bought some USB 3 to USB 2 cables. These won't magically make the USB ports as fast as USB 3, they'll just let them function as a USB 2 level device. I'll put this on camera there. So on one end is the USB 3 connector, and then on the other end is the USB 2 motherboard connector. Like so. Let's throw a graphics card in there. Bottom. Let's get the front. Top. All right, cable managing the fans is probably the hardest part. I'm not going to do a perfect job of the cable management on the fans yet because I plan to flip this fan around and test it in both orientations. But when I'm all done, there's lots of holes on the back of this case here, so it'd be very easy to do a couple little zip ties and get all the fan cables tidied up really neat and out of the way. All right, so we've got the Machinist X79 motherboard in the NR200 case. We've got the Snowman cooler on the Xeon E5-2650 V2. And I've got my multimeter with a K-type thermocouple positioned so it's touching the heatsink on the VRM, and we're going to try to repeat a few tests. The top case fan is currently configured in an exhaust mode, which is how it came from factory. So we're going to test that one first, see how hot the VRM gets. We'll do 3 runs of Cinebench, like I did in my last VRM thermals video, see if it still peaks at 70 degrees Celsius, and then we might repeat the test, flipping the fan around so that it is an intake blowing down on the VRM. So let's see how this goes. All right, so I'd originally recorded a long set of testing here, which was quite boring to watch, so let me summarize it for you really fast. This is the top case fan in exhaust mode, and I ran Cinebench 5 times. At the end of run number 1, the VRM was at 37 degrees Celsius. At the end of run number 2, the VRM was at 43 degrees Celsius. At the end of run number 3, the VRM was at 46 degrees Celsius. By the end of run number 4, it was starting to plateau at 49 degrees Celsius, and by the end of run number 5, it was 50 degrees Celsius. All right, let's shut this down, flip around the case fan, and see if we get anything different. Okay, we've flipped around the top case fan, so it is now an intake. Wow, that drove down the VRM temp quick. Same as before, I'll summarize the testing here. This is the top case fan in intake mode. I was going to repeat with 5 runs of Cinebench, but ended up not needing to. At the end of run number 1, the VRM was at 29 degrees Celsius. At the end of run number 2, the VRM was at 30 degrees Celsius. And at the end of run number 3, the VRM was still at 30 degrees Celsius. Just to make sure everything was still working, I unplugged the case fan for run number 4 and saw the VRM quickly rise to nearly 50 degrees Celsius again. So that case fan was really working in this intake mode. All right, folks, that does it for me. I'm going to leave this fan as an intake fan pointing onto the VRM, and the Snowman cooler is still doing just great. Kept the CPU around the low 50s at the absolute peak of an all-core turbo boost, keeping the 92mm fan at the back of the case as an exhaust. I am going to be stacking a couple of these machines side by side in my home lab, so I want the airflow to stay coming out the rear and coming in from the bottom or the top and not from the side panels, so this configuration is going to work great for me. This is also, these two fans are included with the Cooler Master NR200 case, so it's nice cost-wise. You don't have to buy anything extra. It also came with the fan header splitter so that you can plug on the 2 case fans along with the cooler onto the motherboard. The Machinist X79 Motherboard only comes with 1 fan header that is PWM controlled. The other system chassis fan header is only the 3-pin variety, so it's nice that that splitter came with the case. I'm really happy with these temperatures, and I think I'm going to go ahead and pick up another one of these for my second motherboard, and we'll get our home lab going. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, then make sure you leave it a like, and if you're enjoying this content, then consider subscribing to the channel. That's going to be it for this video. We'll see you in the next one.